What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video, and in this one I'm going to be showing you how to build an awesome budget gaming PC for 2023. This build is primed for the latest AAA titles and popular battle royale games like Fortnite and Apex Legends 2, with hardware that's equipped for this year and beyond. In this video I'm going to show you all the bits that make it possible and provide alternate part choices too, show you guys how to assemble it step by step as we go, and take a detailed dive into performance and gaming benchmarks later. Without any further ado though, let's dive into it. The Corsair Xeneon 32-inch gaming monitor is a panel that packs a punch, bringing your games and media to life on a vibrant, ultra-slim 32-inch IPS 4K display. It's a panel with some power. What's more, the fast 144Hz refresh rate and nippy 1 millisecond response time ensure you can keep a competitive edge. Learn more about the Xeneon 32 UHD 144 at the first links in the description below, and buy now on the Corsair web store. When building a gaming PC, there are 2 or 3 components that are absolutely paramount. All of the components today are important, but these 3 are where it can really go right, or on the flip side, go really wrong. And those components are the CPU, the GPU, and the motherboard. Now, for the processor in this build, I've picked up the brand new i5-13400F. When buying a CPU, there are 2 distinct options, AMD or Intel. For the latest generation, at the moment, Intel is the significantly better buy, especially for the budget and mid-range consumers. Their new i3 and i5 chips are exceptional, and if you wanted to save some cash, you could also swap this CPU out for the 13100F, a cheaper i3 variant with less cores and slightly less performance. One of the advantages of these new chips from Intel specifically is that they support DDR5, the new memory, but also DDR4. It's cheaper, provides very similar performance, and frankly is all you need for a build like this one, a more modest system. And that's where the new B760 motherboards come in. Now, when it comes to buying a motherboard, there are different chipsets available, and each chipset defines the available feature set, if you will, available on the board. B760 is Intel's new, slightly more budget-oriented chipset, but you still get memory overclocking and a choice of either DDR4 or DDR5 motherboards. Not to stress this point too much, with AMD chips, it's DDR5 only. You have no choice. The ASUS TUF board is one of the better value options on the market. This particular design is a full-size ATX variant, meaning it fits in all the standard ATX mid and full tower cases. I'm going to take a closer look at this in a moment, but first I just want to talk you through the graphics I've selected. This is the ASUS Dual RTX 3050. It's a card that you can currently find for a pretty good price, though latest price and availability will be linked below, and provides really strong performance for 1080p medium to high settings in basically every game. You get ray tracing, which at this level is a bit of a waste of time. The 3050's not quite got enough power for that to be useful, but DLSS particularly can be a really nice bonus. AMD also have some decent cards at this price range, which I'll link below, but for this build, you guys have requested it, and the 3050 is a really solid shout. What you want to do is you want to take the motherboard and CPU and unbox both of these components. They're the first 2 parts we're going to put together. Oh yes, look at that. ASUS really do know how to make a nice motherboard. Let's take a quick swizz at the features. Socket for the new CPU, DDR4 memory DIMMs, I haven't mentioned those. PCI Gen 5 on your PCI slot, and you've got an M.2 above. Rear panel is an integrated I/O shield for a cleaner build with Wi-Fi 6, all your audio ports, 20 gig USB-C, and even a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. Plus, there's appeal. We do love appeal. Really, really clean board from ASUS. They've also not overdone it with the yellow tough gaming accents, which I do appreciate. As we say on the channel, for the benefit of new viewers, this is a box fresh CPU. This is a box fresh processor. Don't break the box, James. Don't rip it. Yeah. Well, we do rip it, but just don't ruin the box, because believe it or not, we do reuse some of our PC components from time to time, and having a ripped box makes our editors very, very unhappy with me. With a whopping 10 cores and a boost clock speed of 4.6 gigahertz, this budget Core i5 shows just how far CPUs have come in the last few years. Really, really impressive stuff from Intel. Intel. When you open up an Intel CPU, you will find the processor itself in this little plastic sleeve, which we can pull out. So there it is, the i5 13400F in all of its glory. And then you'll also find in the box, which we're going to be using today, due to the fact our motherboard won't let us overclock the CPU anyway, that's by design, the Intel stock cooler, which has actually got a lot better over the years and will keep a handle on temperatures. Lift up the retention arm on the motherboard socket, drop your processor in by lining the triangles up, and be careful of the pins on the motherboard. Finish things off with the CPU cooler, and that's all you've got to do. Nice and simple. While the motherboard's out, I'm also just going to add in some RAM or memory. This is a 16 gig kit of Corsair's Vengeance RGB RS. Look at that beautiful looking kit of memory. Low profile DIMMs too. I mean, if you've got a big cooler, these aren't going to be a problem. So pull back the grey clips, top and the bottom ones, slide the memory into place. Boom. Lovely stuff. You get a nice satisfying click sound, and are going to repeat that for as many DIMMs as you've got. If you want to double check they're all in, you can either give them another bit of a push or try and pull them out from either side, and you shouldn't have any luck. That's how you know they're all nicely installed. SSD is next. I've picked up a 1TB Samsung SSD 980. Not the Pro, not the Evo, just a bog standard 980, but with read speeds of about 3.5 gigabytes a second. This is very snappy and will still give super quick Windows boot up times. Great choice from Samsung, and it's going to install into the top slot. But for this stage of the build, you've got to go ahead and retrieve a special tool. Rumor has it, these are 1 in a million. It's not actually 1 in a million. It's just what we call on the channel a teeny tiny screwdriver, aka a very small Phillips head, as a bigger one is going to thread these screws and make your life a bit more tricky. Take off the heatsink, slide the drive in, put the heatsink back on, and return the teeny tiny screws into place with the teeny tiny screwdriver. Available now at GeekaWhat.com. Not actually. Maybe one day. Lovely stuff. So now you've got what we call a completed motherboard assembly. And this can go ahead and be moved over. I'm just waving this about. Can be moved over into the case, as that is the next natural stage. Now, I've gone a little bit on the larger side. This thing isn't huge, but Cooler Master's Masterbox 520 not only looks fantastic, but isn't the smallest thing in the world. I'll let you guys see what you think for yourselves, but with glass panels, RGB fans, a great build quality, and some really nice, well thought out features, Cooler Master are onto a winner with this case. With any chassis, what you want to do is just strip back all of the panels. So we want to take off the rear side panel, which is just a standard steel one. Does it pass the wobble test? Yes, pretty rigid. So just going to unclip that one too, and you can see the large tempered glass side panel that's going to show you the innards of your case, and might seem a bit of a weird thing, but it's not tinted too heavily. Some of these have just got way too much of a tint on, and that's not good. Before finally laying the chassis down flat, as that's going to allow for the installation of the motherboard nice and easily. Tuck away any of the stray cables that are poking through, and then take a moment to double check where all the standoffs are inside the case. We'll circle these to make it easier. And as a bit of a hint, these need to match up with the standoffs on the motherboard. We'll go ahead and circle these ones too to highlight where they are. These need to match up. If they don't, and especially if you've got any extra ones that shouldn't be there, they can cause big problems. So make sure all the standoffs are right before screwing the board in. Slide it in. No I/O shield to worry about, as it's integrated and pre-installed. Very, very good. Slide that into place. Lovely. And then add all of the screws in to fasten it in, and make sure the board is not going to move anywhere. Work from the middle outwards, and don't force it. You don't want to thread any of the standoffs, as it can then make taking the motherboard out later a bit difficult. Looking very good. You can see how with a case like this, you really need a full-size ATX board to fill it out, and the design of this tough board looks awesome. I'm hoping it's going to match nicely with the GPU. This isn't an ASUS tough design card, it's their dual instead, which provides better value and still, I mean, more than ample cooling. We've reviewed this card. I think it's one of our best viewed build videos on YouTube like ever. It's got hundreds of thousands of views, and for good reason. This is how you make a budget GPU. Take a look at that. Lovely stuff. So you've got two large fans on the front, nice ASUS dual design, hint of RGB, an 8-pin power connector, and a back plate which prevents sagging and also looks a bit nicer. As far as the I/O on the rear goes, you've got HDMI and 3 DisplayPort connections. So if you've got a triple monitor setup, this thing is going to cope A-OK. A-OK. Tele-TV gaming on this is going to be an absolute breeze. Pretty much any title, medium to high, and you're going to get some decent results. I'm going to lay it flat on the table this time and not stand it upright, so we don't have a replay of what just happened. A-OK. Otherwise, though, to actually get this thing installed where it's probably going to be safest away from my dropping hands, what we want to do is take the card and hover it over the top slot. That's the grey PCI slot just here. Now, doing this will actually show us which of the rear covers need removing. Do you want to take that out and look after the screw, as we need to pop the screw back in to secure the GPU in a moment. Remember to push back the clip on the top slot, so a little something like so. Slide the card into place. Oh yes. Then it should, he says, clip in nice and easily. Add the screws back on to stop that from happening, and we can finish things off by wiring the card with our power supply in just a moment. Talking of which, here it is. I've picked up Cooler Master's MWE 500. This might seem like a lower wattage power supply than you'd expect, but with a non-overclockable CPU, a GPU that only needs one 8-pin power connector, I think everyone nowadays is so caught up with 8, 900, 1000 watt power supplies, GPUs that need 400 watts on the end. It's ridiculous. The 3050 is a much more frugal option, and this has nice black individually sort of plastic sleeve cables. It's not modular, which is a bit of a letdown, but with loads of room in the bottom of the case, we can tidy up all the unused cables, and at least this way you can't lose them in future if you ever need another GPU power connector or want to add in a beefier CPU, more hard drives, you name it. This thing is going to keep you covered within moderation. This case also has ventilation on both the top and the bottom of the PSU shield, meaning either the fan can intake air on the power supply from underneath or from on top, meaning if it's on a thick rug or carpet, you are actually nicely covered. I'm going to go fan down and then just go ahead and plug in the motherboard cable, which is the largest of all, the CPU power connector, which is a 4 or 8-pin design, often a split of both, and the GPU power connection, which is formed of a 6+2 pin connector. You'll find dual 6+2 pins on here for larger, beefier graphics cards, and that's how you can tell this apart from the CPU one. While we're here, it also makes sense to add in the front panel cables. These are what control all the ports on the top of the case. So we've got a USB-C port, which plugs into the smaller USB connection, a USB 3, which is the big notched connection, our HD audio, which runs to the bottom left for the headphone mic combo jack, and then the JFP1 to the power and reset switches, which plug up to the bottom right of the motherboard. These ones can be fiddly, so follow the diagram on screen now and take it nice and easy. Otherwise though, it's time to see how this thing performs after, of course, I've booted it up and checked out the aesthetics with the RGB, it all powered up and the fans spinning. Let's take a look. Taking a look at performance, and there's a couple of key questions you guys will probably want the answers to. Does the stock cooler incinerate this CPU? Well, no. With an average of 66 degrees on the processor and a max of 75, the stock cooler certainly didn't struggle to keep up in this instance. All of this resulted in some pretty good gaming performance. Take a look at Warzone 2, for example. 1080p, high settings with DLSS set to quality, and this impressive build pulled in 91 frames per second. To be hitting over 60 FPS by around a 50% margin on a budget build is very, very good as a rule of thumb, and to do so in the brand new Warzone 2 is even more impressive. Move through into Call of Duty's Modern Warfare 2, essentially in the background a very similarly constructed game to Modern Warfare 2, and here at 1080p high with DLSS set to quality, this build pulled in an impressive 76 frames per second on average. 71 and 65 for the 90 and 99 percentiles were very good too, and as always our frame rate was tested with both MSI Afterburner's Riva Tuner and Nvidia FrameView. Moving on into Fortnite next, 1080p competitive. This is where you tune everything to low, set the render distance to far, and enable DLSS for that impressive frame rate boost. Here he achieved 232 FPS on average, more than enough to satisfy even the highest refresh rate budget 1080p gaming monitors, and needless to say experienced a very smooth gaming experience. Move into Apex Legends at 1080p high, and here once again frame rates were solid, 127 FPS on average to be precise, provided some really nice mileage, and a very good competitive gaming surrounding with this system. Finally, to wrap things up, I also tested out Overwatch 2, 1080p ultra settings this time in the latest remastered Overwatch, and the frame rate of the day was 151 FPS. Certainly no shortage then of frame rate with this build, and while the Nvidia GPUs at this price point are a tad more expensive than their AMD competition, access to their better AI-backed resolution scaler over AMD's FSR tech could just be the winner for a few people considering what card to buy. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to get subscribed. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.